So, have you ever wondered what happens when things go wrong between people, but it's not exactly a crime? You know, things like a broken contract, someone damaging your property, just those everyday disagreements that really need a referee. Well, today we're diving into the system that's designed for exactly that, civil law. All right, let's make this real. Picture this. There's a big storm one night, and your neighbor's huge old tree finally gives up and comes crashing down, completely destroying that brand new fence you just spent a fortune on. It's an absolute mess. Your neighbor says they're sorry, but they don't offer to pay. So what do? This isn't just some textbook question. This is a real-life dispute. And that exact situation, the tree, the fence, and the awkward conversation about who should pay for it, is what the legal world calls a private dispute. See, it's a conflict between two individuals, not a crime against society or the government. And for this kind of problem, we've got a very specific toolkit to deal with it.
And that toolkit right there is civil law. It is the formal, official system we use to sort out all these non-criminal fights. The main goal here isn't to punish your neighbor or send them to jail. Nope, it's all about resolving the issue and, hopefully, getting you the money to fix your fence.
You know, to really get a handle on what civil law is, it's actually super helpful to look at what it's not. Our legal system is basically split into two huge domains. You can think of them like two completely different operating systems for justice, each with its own rules and its own purpose.
And here they are. Pretty much every legal wrong you can think of, from a major crime to a minor disagreement, is going to fall into one of these two buckets: criminal law or civil law. They are the two giant pillars holding up our entire legal system. So let's break down how you can tell them apart. So, how do we tell them apart? Well, there's a really easy way. You just have to ask two simple questions. First, who are the people involved? And second, what's the end goal here? What's the whole point of the case? The answers to those questions are totally different for each system. Okay, let's hit that first question. Who are the parties? In a civil case, like our fence example, it's you suing your neighbor, a private person suing another private person. The one doing the suing is called the plaintiff, and the one getting sued is the defendant. But in a criminal case, it's not the victim versus the bad guy. It's the government, the state, that brings the case against the defendant because the crime is seen as a wrong against all of society.
And that leads right into the second question. What's the purpose? Civil law is all about repair. The goal is literally to make the victim whole again, which usually means making the defendant pay money to cover the damages. Criminal law, though, is all about punishment. The purpose there is to penalize the person who broke society's rules, to maintain order, and to deliver justice for the public.
Now, because they have such different goals, it makes sense that they have completely different outcomes. What happens if you lose a civil case versus losing a criminal case? Well, they are just worlds apart.
In the world of civil law, the outcome is called a remedy. And that's a really important word to know. A remedy is just the court's solution to the problem. Most of the time it's money, sure, but it could also be a court order that forces someone to do something or maybe stop doing something. It's the court's way of trying to fix what was broken. And here's where it all comes together. Look at the huge difference in outcomes: jail time versus paying money. But the really fascinating part is the standard of proof. To convict someone of a crime, the government has to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. That is a really, really high bar. But in a civil case, you only need a preponderance of the evidence. All that means is you have to show that your story is more likely true than not, just over 50%. Why the huge difference? Because in a criminal case, someone's freedom is on the line, so the standard has to be incredibly high. Okay, so we've got the what, and we've got the how. But what about the why? Why do we have this entire, massive, complicated system just to handle these private fights? Why is it so important? To put it simply, our society just couldn't function without it. Civil law is what gives you a peaceful option to solve that fence problem with your neighbor. It's what makes businesses work by enforcing the contracts they sign. It holds people and big companies accountable when they're careless. It protects what's yours. It's really the quiet, constant system working in the background to make sure there's some basic fairness in our daily lives.
This quote just nails it. At its heart, civil law is an incredible human invention. It takes our basic instinct for revenge, for getting even, and replaces it with a process based on reason and evidence and rules. It's the fundamental difference between a society of feuds and a society of laws.
So that brings us to one last really interesting question. We've spent all this time drawing a clear line between these two legal worlds. But can that line get blurry? Is it possible for one single action to lead to both? Could someone be prosecuted by the government in criminal court and be sued by the victim in civil court for the exact same thing? That's something to chew on.